Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. I am Rune from Rune'sGuild, and this is another episode of RPG Horror Stories. Today we have a story regarding a player that cheated on her boyfriend with another player and completely destroyed their entire group and campaign. So, before we get into even longer of an introduction for this story, let's go ahead and roll it. Hello, this is me from the future. I want to give a warning real quick. This story contains themes of suicide and things in that realm, so if that makes you uncomfortable, please do not watch. I don't want you to suffer any ill effects because of this story. I would much rather you just watch another one, or just go about your day blissfully happy and unaware of the content there within this particular one. So yeah, that's about it. Enjoy. This is a story about how my last TTRPG group fell apart due to players not respecting personal boundaries. I'm using a throwaway account as I know some of the people involved read Reddit, and I don't want to incite or be on the receiving end of resulting drama. For ease of reference, the cast is as follows. Me, your dear writer and forever DEM. TTRPG fanatic who has been running various systems for 10 plus years, including D&D, Call of Cthulhu, World of Darkness, and Shadowrun. Bard, a close family friend of mine. We've known each other for over 10 years and are still in regular contact after this story. Cleric, a mutual friend of mine and Bard's who soon becomes a close friend of mine due to the enthusiasm he displays in D&D. Paladin, another of Bard's friends, best friend of 3 years to Cleric, and before long a good friend of mine. Rogue, Paladin's girlfriend who joins the game later, used to be a fashion model and is completely new to the world of TTRPGs. Ranger, a friend of Cleric from work who joins the game at the same time as Rogue. Our story begins in late 2019. I, a veteran forever DM of multiple game systems, am approached by my longtime friend Bard asking if I'd like to run a D&D 5th edition game for him and a few of our mutual friends, who have always been interested in D&D but had never had a chance to play. It's been a while since I've had a regular group, so I jump at the chance, and being able to introduce some of my closest friends to a hobby that's very important to me sounds like an excellent time. Bard hosts our first few games at his house, and I meet and quickly become friends with Cleric and Paladin, as they take to the game like naturals, and we spend many hours outside of the game bonding over video games, music, and nerd stuff. The group also includes my best friend of 20 years, playing a gnome wizard, and another one of Bard's friends playing a drow fighter. Though these two aren't relevant to the events to come and are only mentioned for the sake of establishing our original group of 4. As most of the players are new to D&D, and I am new to 5th edition, having only ran 3.5, I run the group through Lost Mines of Phandelver, and we have a fantastic time overall. Then, 2020 rolls around, and with it comes the pandemic. Lockdowns begin, and we can no longer meet at Bard's house to play in person. This doesn't end up being a problem, as I quickly work out how virtual tabletops work, and set up a Discord so we can play online. Freed from the restriction of having to drive from all over the state to meet up physically, we even end up playing every week, as opposed to only having a session every fortnight. Everyone is having a great time, and playing TTRPGs keeps us all sane during the pandemic. After a while, Bard, Cleric, and Paladin even become interested in games other than D&D, so I end up running other games on alternating weeks, such as Call of Cthulhu, and even a bit of Vampire the Masquerade. Everything seems to be going well, and being all friends in real life, our group gels fantastically and has a bare minimum of drama. It's after a few months of playing online that 2 things happen that will spell the eventual doom of the group and destruction of years-long friendships. The first is that Cleric begins to talk to a coworker about our adventures and, excited to try TTRPGs, that coworker asks if he can join us sometime. The second is that Paladin's girlfriend, who has spent the last few months listening to our sexy voices, her words, wants to finally join our game. I've been enjoying my time with the group, and in my mind, more people could only mean more fun times. So I welcome both of these newcomers, and Ranger and Rogue soon become valued members of the group. Sadly, it's here where things start to go wrong, but definitely not in a way I expected. The first red flag shows itself when Rogue asked me for build advice for her character. Being new to the game and wanting to be a helpful DM, I oblige her, and we start talking on Facebook. After a while, the subject of these conversations changes from D&D to other nerd stuff and soon life in general. I start to value Rogue as a friend, and every now and then we spend hours talking to each other about our lives and problems and just generally being there for each other. Several times, Rogue mentions that it was our sexy voices that got her interested in joining our game. And she says a number of things to me that are borderline creepy, such as asking what I, as a married man, think about polyamorism, and showing pictures of me when she was a model and asking if I found them attractive. At this point, I feel it's important to specify that I am actually asexual, so the innuendo is lost on me and I don't really think anything of it until my wife points it out to me. Now realizing that Rogue is flirting with me and not wanting to lead her on, I tell her I am happily married and don't want to come between her and Paladin. And thankfully, our conversation was returned to normal afterwards. I still value her as a friend, thinking I've nipped the problem in the bud. I put these anomalies out of my mind and out of my life and continue on. The second red flag appears a few months later, when I notice Ranger and Rogue flirting with each other in-game. This upsets Paladin a little, as, being new to the hobby, he still sometimes has problems separating his character interactions in and out from character. I immediately lay down some rules for the group stating that romancing other players is off limits, as not everyone is comfortable with it, and both Rogue and Ranger agree to tone things down and soon move on to romancing NPCs instead. It's at this point that Ranger comes to me to apologize, thinking he'd done something wrong. I tell him no, nothing is wrong, it's just important sometimes to set boundaries as not everyone treats the game with the same level of seriousness. He seems to understand this and casually mentions that he has been talking to Rogue out of game, getting to know her, and that she thought it might be fun for a plotline for their characters. He states that Rogue being Paladin's girlfriend in real life shouldn't come into it, and that he and Rogue just want to act out a storyline. While I agree with him that Paladin should learn to separate the game from real life, I tell Ranger that I'm erring on the side of caution so that nobody is uncomfortable in-game. He says he understands, and I move on, feeling happy that I resolved something and kept my group intact. We keep playing for a while, and while there's now a little bit of tension between Paladin and Ranger, it doesn't get to a point that disrupts the game. Then, suddenly, everything comes to a head in mid-2021. I am getting ready for the next session when I receive a message from Paladin. He won't be able to make it to the game and isn't sure when he'll feel up to playing again. Sensing that something is obviously wrong, both Cleric and Paladin were the two players in my group who never missed a session up until that point and look forward to play the game every day, every week. I asked him what had happened. Paladin tells me that Rogue has just broken up with him because she's seeing someone else, and he is so shocked he couldn't possibly work up the energy to play. I'm not sure what to do. So I just tell him to take the time he needs, and if he feels up to it, he's welcome to join us anyway. He thanks me for my offer, but tells me he'll need some time before he can play a game with Rogue in it, as he doesn't want either of them to bring their out-of-game drama into the game. So, I'm feeling put out by this bombshell, being down a player and being concerned for both Paladin and Rogue, but Bard, Cleric, and Ranger are still keen to play, so I go ahead and run the weekly session as per normal. It feels rather strange without Paladin there, and I can't help noticing that Rogue and Ranger have started flirting in character again. Paladin isn't there to feel uncomfortable, I figure, so I caution them to be careful and to remember our rule, but basically leave them to it after a while, being blissfully unaware that everything is about to go wrong next session. The next week's session comes around, and Cleric and I have spent a lot of time consoling Paladin, eventually convincing him to come and play with us. We make a promise that both he and Rogue will be civil to each other and that everyone is just there to play a game. And I recognize now, long after the events, that this was my mistake. By putting these two people together in-game, I was only inviting drama. But at the time, I thought I was just making sure my group ran smoothly and trying to maintain business as usual. Paladin joins the session, and we're right into a dungeon crawl. There's some slight tension between Paladin and Rogue, but for the most part, the session is going smoothly and everyone is enjoying working on the puzzles and sneaking around the monsters I've carefully placed. Then, for some reason, Ranger starts acting extremely competitive, trying to one-up everything Paladin's character does, and constantly belittling his decisions both in and out of character. He starts bragging about how he's dealt more damage this session than Paladin, and how he and Rogue work much better as a team than Paladin and Cleric. This obviously gets to Paladin, who is already in a bad frame of mind and is essentially only there because Cleric and I forced him. Sensing some drama brewing, I stop the game and tell Ranger he's been disruptive and warn him that if he doesn't stop needling Paladin, I'll end the session and kick him from the group. Suddenly, Ranger exclaims loudly that she doesn't care about Paladin's feelings and that he's just acting like a baby, and that if I was going to kick Ranger, she would be leaving as well. I'm confused at this point, so I reiterate that attacking each other out of character is not tolerated in my game, and ask why she would be so offended by me telling Ranger to tone it down. That's when Ranger drops the bombshell on all of us. He is Rogue's new boyfriend and has been dating her for at least a month. Pause. That is a bombshell. That is a massive bombshell. Oh my god. I did not expect that to just get dropped right then. I mean, like, I expected it, you know, like, towards the end or something, but I didn't expect it just, like, I mean, like, a month. I mean, how long? I mean, she was cheating on him, right, for a while, because they've only been broken up a week now. So, yeah, she's been cheating on him for at least a month. Or I guess did cheat on him for at least a month, because they're not together anymore. Anyways, back to the story. This single revelation destroys the entire group in a matter of minutes. Paladin quits in a haze of anger and hatred, humiliated by Rogue and Ranger. Cleric is disgusted in Ranger's behavior and leaves to support his best friend. Obviously, I have no choice but to end the session, so I disconnect from voice chat to try to figure out how to process this mess. Rogue comes to me apologizing for Ranger's behavior, but insisting they both did nothing wrong. Yeah, okay, I'm sure you didn't do anything wrong when you cheated on your boyfriend and then just started dating somebody else, just because you didn't do anything wrong. I ask her what would make her think that belittling Paladin in such a way right after they broke up was acceptable. Her response is to tell me why she broke up with Paladin in the first place. Apparently, she is polyamorous and saw nothing wrong with dating Ranger while still in a relationship with Paladin. And when Paladin discovered what she'd been doing, he wouldn't accept that she was poly, and so she broke up with him. Okay, so nothing wrong with polyamory at all. There's nothing wrong with it. But you can't be in a polyamorous relationship and not tell the other person. That's sort of something you gotta talk about, like, first date kind of thing. Like, are you okay with poly, you know? Do you want to get married someday? Do you want kids? These are all things you need to get out of the way, like, right up front, because those are huge deal breakers, you know? It's not something you wait until a year into a relationship to, like, be like, hey, do you want to have kids? And then you find out, no, they don't want to have kids. That's a whole year, like, down the drain. And, I mean, sure, you could, like, change your opinion, like, oh, maybe, you know, oh, my partner doesn't want kids, so I don't want kids. That's fine. You know, sure, you can do that. But it's just one of those things that it's better to know up front as opposed to find out later on, as well as, like, polyamory, you know. And I obviously she's been, you know, feeling she's polyamorous for a while, although I wonder if her definition of polyamory is, you know, I can be with as many people as I want, you know, but my partners can't be. I don't know, it just seems like she's the kind of person so far that she's just straight up just... Polyamory is, I'm dating whoever I want, and I'm not going to tell anybody. You know, she doesn't want polyamory. She wants an open relationship where you don't have to tell anybody who you're with or anything like that. You know, obviously polyamory, maybe you don't need to tell anybody, but, like, there's a difference between polyamorous and an open relationship. And what she wants is an open relationship, not polyamory, because polyamory means that you're including everybody in the relationship in some way. But the open relationship just sort of means that, like, you know, it's whatever you want. And since she wasn't telling Paladin about it, that's just kind of, you know, that's not, I don't know, I guess that doesn't really feel like polyamory. And who knows, maybe he would have been okay with it if she had actually spoken to him about it. But I'm assuming there's probably red flags in their relationship where she'd, like, bring it up and be like, yeah, so I'm poly, or like, little things about that, that he just didn't really notice. I don't know. Back to the post, wherever the heck I left off. Both did nothing wrong, except apparently polyamorous broke up with them. I didn't know what to say to this, so I just said that I accepted that she had her reasons and it was none of my business. My hope was that, given enough time, people would cool down and we could move on. It's almost uncanny how swiftly the aftermath unfolds and destroys any feigned hope of salvaging anything from this mess. Over the course of the next 48 hours, Paladin ends up having a mental breakdown, tries to... well, I'll put a disclaimer at the beginning. Tries to kill himself by downing an entire packet of paracetamol, and makes a graphic death threats to both Ranger and Rogue that result in him being visited by the police, taken to the hospital and having his stomach pumped, and then committed to a mental ward for a few days. Paladin tells Cleric that he resents him for bringing Ranger into the group, and Cleric understandably cuts ties to Paladin due to this and his, quite frankly, scary behavior towards Ranger and Rogue after the fact. Ranger feels guilty after everything happens and offers to keep playing with me, but neither me, Cleric, or Bard feel up to it. Rogue insists that she did nothing wrong and that everything was just a ploy on Paladin's part for attention. This all happened about a year ago now. There's a bit more to this story, but this post is long enough as it is and mostly seems irrelevant compared to what happened between Paladin, Ranger, and Rogue. I did intend to start a new game with Bard and Cleric and a couple of our friends, but shortly after this all happened, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and unfortunately in the few months I took to come to terms with that and begin treatment, people fell out of touch, and those who are still around have new jobs and commitments. I'm still in contact with Bard, of course, as one of my oldest friends, and I still occasionally talk to Cleric, but Paladin essentially cut off contact with everyone, out of concern for my health, I never made an attempt to contact Ranger or Rogue again. After a while, I missed DMing, so I put a call in some Discord and Facebook groups to recruit players, and I've now been playing with a brand new group for the last 5 months. Sometimes I feel a little sad when I realize I'm playing with strangers instead of my actual friends, but with every session, I come to appreciate these strangers more and more. On the bright side, the distance created by not knowing anyone personally will ensure this group won't have the same issues. Update. After seeing how much of a reaction the story got, I thought I'd post a little update to try and answer some questions, clarify some things, and offer some resolution. First off, I totally understand that there were a number of times in this story where I dropped the ball or didn't handle something in the correct way. Inviting Paladin back to the game or even allowing Rogue to continue being in the game after the first red flags are things I definitely would have done differently in hindsight. I won't offer any excuses other than to say at the time I was happy to have what seemed like a regular group of real friends who all gelled together, and I honestly underestimated how problematic these things actually were. During the pandemic, RPGs were essentially the only regular social contact we would have with each other, and trying to keep the group going to maintain that contact was my priority. I also feel it's important once again to point out that I'm ace, and I know being ace is an excuse for letting obviously manipulative behavior slide, but it doesn't mean that sometimes I recognize the same cues as allosexual people. Particularly when it comes to flirting. It tends to go over my head and needs to be pointed out to me. Even then, I often don't recognize the full extent of it. Secondly, I understand that Rogue do not in any way represent the poly community. I know poly relationships are built on trust and mutual respect, that's what I was saying, and while I didn't really know anything about the poly community at the time, it became pretty obvious to me later that Rogue was just being an asshole and used being poly as an excuse. I said the same thing. Finally, I sort of glossed over a lot of what happened at the end due to me not wanting to make this post even longer. But I want to clarify that both Cleric and I did immediately check up on Paladin and try our very best to apologize for what happened and to support him. Understandably, he felt betrayed, and while I don't condone death threats, it's obvious he was in a very bad place at the time. These days, I do check in on Paladin occasionally, and last I heard from him, he has found a new girlfriend who cares about him and seems to be happy. Though understandably doesn't ever want to touch a TTRPG again. I haven't personally spoken to either Ranger or Rogue, though from what I understand, mostly from Cleric as he still talks to Ranger, they're still together but are going through a bit of a rough patch. Apparently several months into their relationship, Rogue started seeing someone else behind Ranger's back, and when he found out, she threatened to leave him unless he accepted her for who she is, and ended up begrudgingly consenting to the situation. Wow, once a cheater, always a cheater. Maybe you shouldn't date somebody who cheated on their partner with you. Maybe that's not the best idea to date somebody who literally cheated with you on someone else. That's just, my opinion on that, though. Maybe it's okay. How do I feel about this story? Well, first off, like I said earlier, that's not poly. That's just somebody cheating and using poly as an excuse, and that's what gives communities a bad name. I'm curious to see how other ace people might feel about this. Me personally, I'm not ace, so I can't really understand it just sort of sliding over your head when somebody's flirting with you. Like, I understand, like, not noticing if somebody's flirting with you, but I guess OP kind of did mention it. It's not that the OP didn't necessarily recognize it. I mean, obviously, they didn't know that the flirting was happening, but the red flags that were there after they found out was sort of just like, oh, well, I need to cap that, need to keep the group together, blah, blah, blah. So I guess that makes sense, but, I mean, what else to say? I mean, just don't cheat on your partners. If you feel unhappy in a relationship, just end it and date somebody else, or talk about your problems. I don't know. I mean, communication is a good thing to have. Also with the group, I mean, I feel like why did the now that I think about it, why did the OP not tell Paladin that his girlfriend was flirting with him? I feel like that's something you just sort of bring up to somebody. I mean, maybe everything could have been prevented if they just brought that up, because I don't know. I mean, I get the idea of preserving the social group as a whole, but why wouldn't you tell Paladin when the person was flirting? If your goal is to preserve the social group, you think you would just mention that to be sort of hey, be on the lookout. And on top of that, I mean, I feel like Cleric is the only one who didn't necessarily do anything wrong here. All Cleric did was try to get somebody to play the game with him, and then that person ended up cheating. I mean, I feel like from the very beginning, when she's like, oh yeah, your sexy voices made me want to play, that's when I probably would have just been like, yeah, no, it's okay. I think that the group has a few too many people in it. Thanks. Okay, well, I think that about does it for this story. A lot of bombshells, a lot of twists, a lot of cheating, a lot of obvious things happening there at the end that should have just been seen, As I said before, why would you be with somebody who cheated with you on somebody else? But hey, that's just me, maybe cheaters aren't always cheaters, but I don't believe that for very much. Anyways, that is going to do it for this story. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you have your own, leave it in the comments below. If you don't, good job. Drop me a like and a sub if you feel like it. You don't have to. Heck, you can even dislike the video if you're so inclined to tell me you hate me. Yeah, but for me, that's about all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.